Asterion and Selenea were trapped near their lair, pouring every ounce of strength into the rising magic within them. The unicorns on their foreheads burned brighter and brighter with silver-white light. Transparent fractures spread through the air, originating from those horns and crawling toward their bodies. They were so close to breaking free. From the dark corner of the lair, a figure in a black robe stepped forward, the hood shadowing a silver-gray, ghastly mask. Wisps of dark mist curled around him. He lifted a thin, pale hand and pointed a wand at Asterion. Black and red light crackled along its length and converged at the tip. "Don't bother with the stallion," a voice hissed inside his head. "I want the fetus in the mare's belly." Quirrell's head throbbed as he fought the voice. He forced the wand's tip toward the smaller unicorn, whose belly was clearly swollen. The electrical arcs on the wand snapped louder in his ears. Asterion shattered his restraints first, porcelain's sweet noise exploding as he burst free. He didn't hesitate. He let loose all his power and charged, aimed straight for the hooded figure's chest. The spiral of his long horn was already condensed into near-solid silver light, the tip seeming to lengthen. A strike from that horn would rend a wizard's body and end any fight. Quirrell didn't have time to move. The unicorn's blistering sprint was terrifying. The silver-white point of the horn was inches from his robe. The ground beneath Quirrell softened. Black-gray mud rose and swallowed the soil, and Asterion's hooves sank as the muck slithered up his flanks and sealed his mouth. The stallion's charge halted mid-stride, as if paused by invisible hands. Cold sweat beaded on Quirrell's forehead. "Master, it worked," he heard his own tremor. "Heh. Well done, Quirinus," the voice replied, amused. "Yes, the magic you taught me, powerful magic." Quirrell pressed at his chest, trying to steady a pounding heart. The ward that held the unicorn had been a dark arts measure Lord Voldemort had taught him, rare, automatic, a protective trap. It had required gruesome preparation, 10 hearts of shape-shifting lizards vivisected, a complicated potion brewed and painted on his skin. Quirrell had spent days tracking unicorns in the Forbidden Forest and preparing this spell. Another crisp sound. Selenea snapped free. She moved, but before she could think of helping Asterion, innumerable withered yellow thorns erupted from the ground and trees, bristling and twisting upward. In seconds, they interlaced into a dome that excluded the forest and moonlight. Inside, Selenea's faint white glow was the only thing cutting the darkness. Panic surged through her. Should she break the thorns? Try to free Asterion? She did not consider killing the hooded wizard. He might have more traps. Fear, anger, helplessness crashed through her in a tide. A sharp pain stabbed her belly. Her silver-white aura faltered. Behind her, Quirrell's wand flared red. He had to act. Voldemort's voice pressed against him like a physical force. He needed the unicorn fetus's blood. Without it, the life force in his body would burn out in a month. Then there was another sound, not the crackle of lightning, but a faint, hungry kindling. Quirrell's eyes caught a small flame in the darkness, crimson gold, its light licking the withered thorns. The instant he saw it, boom, the thorn dome flared into brilliant crimson gold fire. The heat confused Quirrell. The electrical arcs along his wand jittered. Through the blaze stepped a strange creature, the size of a camel, its body covered in pale golden scales that gleamed like metal. Short white jade horns curved from its head. A man of molten crimson gold flowed in the heat. Its glazed eyes reflected Quirrell's stunned face. With every step, the air shimmered. The heat rose. "I want it." Voldemort's voice keened in Quirrell's mind, desperate and shrill. "Quirinus, this vast, pure life force, if I take it, I will recover." As if compelled by that ache, Quirrell flicked his wrist and turned the dark red arc into an arrow, loosing it at the newcomer. The bolt struck true. A few faint ripples passed over the creature's scales, and then nothing. No pain, no hesitation. At the same moment, the creature belched streams of purifying fire that braided into massive crimson gold dragons and charged the hooded figure from every side. Quirrell barely registered it before something cold and sharp entered his mind. Useless. Control ripped away from him. The eyes in the mask's sockets flared scarlet. The dark mist around the hood surged. The body that had been Quirrell twisted vanished from one spot and instantly reappeared beside the restrained Asterion. With a single elegant flick of the wand, a deep cut opened at the unicorn's throat. Viscous, silver-white blood sprayed, bathing the masked figure. He let the blood pour over the mask, felt it slick and hot, but he did not lap at it. He did not drink. He had a better option now. Inside the arena, flames licked in shades of crimson and gold. When Selenea saw the gruesome, bloody gash across Asterian's neck, she gave a pained cry. The anguish in her abdomen came back in waves, much worse than before. She dropped to her knees, tears welling, and stared at Asterian as he collapsed helplessly. Silver-white blood, streaked with mud, kept pouring from the black, smoking wound. A clear, furious cry, like a unicorn's, suddenly split the air, sending ripples through the surrounding fire. Quirrell's mouth curled into a smirk. He seemed utterly untroubled. "What abundant vitality," he said. "When did the wizarding world gain such a creature?" In reply, a dozen crimson gold dragons and a torrent of smaller fiery ribbons surged from the curtain of flame, writhing like ethereal snakes. Quirrell showed no sign of panic. He lifted his wand with casual grace, like a conductor directing an orchestra. The air twisted and boiled from the heat. "Fiendfire," he intoned. Dozens of viscous fiendfire, black and tar-like, shot from the wand tip and coiled into giant python-like serpents. They slammed into the crimson gold dragons with deafening explosions, showering sparks like a storm. A few thin fire snakes broke free and lunged at Quirrell. "Black vortex charm," he said. A spinning, light-devouring vortex tore into the charging flames, pulling and compressing them until their shrieks were cut off, as if an invisible force crushed them. Quirrell countered with raw magical technique rather than basic counterspells like finite incantatum, because he had noticed something strange. These searing flames seemed to contain no trace of magic at all. They behaved like natural fire, born of the world itself. In the brief pause that allowed, Voldemort, Quirrell's mind calculating coldly, cast a finite incantatum at a small stream of the flame. The fire did not diminish. "Interesting," he said. With his power, no natural magic should have been impervious to a finite incantatum. The conclusion formed instantly. The force controlling the fire contained no magic that he could touch. At that instant, the luminous figure vanished, as naturally and smoothly as if folding itself away, then apparated beside Asterian. It spat a large glob of clear saliva onto the wound. The coiling black smoke eased by more than half. The torn flesh began to knit visibly. The bleeding slowed and then stopped. Voldemort's heart leapt with victorious greed. A mere spit of saliva had neutralized a curse of the dark arts and begun healing the injury itself. This creature was extraordinary. If he could seize it, he could restore himself to full power. Quirrell suddenly coughed up a mouthful of dark red blood. "Humph, what a frail body," he sneered. Pressing past the strain on his own physical vessel, he sucked vitality from himself and poured it into his magic, converting flesh and life into raw power. Dark lightning, icy crows, and a hail of flickering flying blades erupted around him as he twisted and vanished, appearing in new positions. This part of the battle had moved deep into the Forbidden Forest. Hogwarts' restrictions on apparition no longer bound him. Complex, high-level teleportation became little more than an evasive flourish in his hands. The luminous creature grew flustered. Its combat experience was too slight. Even with routine training beside its master, it was ill-prepared for this level of conflict. The enemy's movements near Selenea made it fearful to apparat with Asterion. A moment of vulnerability would be fatal. The glassy light in its eyes darted constantly, tracking each of Quirrell's shifts. Then pure fire burst from it in an uncontrolled flood, a sea of gold-laced flame, and it drove the blaze to encircle Asterion and Selenea. It was preparing to fight with everything it had when a blank area opened in the heart of that inferno. Quirrell stood at the center, untouched by the rolling fire, a gap the flames could not cross. He tossed several bottles and jars into the air, colorful liquids and crystals scattered down. "Laceration," he said, and the scorching air seemed to solidify. The potions merged, then snapped together, forming no fewer than 100 razor-sharp blades of blood-red glass. They leapt outward, flying straight for Selenea. The luminous creature widened its eyes and instinctively prepared to apparat them both away. At the same instant, it registered a pale, nearly transparent figure near the blades. Metal rang as something struck steel, then a dull, wet sound as blade met flesh. The transparent form resolved into Quirrell himself, cloaked and masked like a specter. The Quirrell standing in the center of the clearing shimmered and broke apart like a shattered mirror. The cloaked Quirrell drew a light green dagger and plunged it into the luminous creature's flank, drawing a stream of golden red blood from its waist and abdomen. Pain flared in the creature's eyes. Quirrell ignored the two unicorns, dead or dying, and stared hungrily at the beads of blood, each glittering with extraordinary vitality. He had refrained from using Avada Kedavra because he wanted the creature alive. He intended to harvest it, to reclaim the power he craved. As the fight dragged on and his body began to fail, his goal hardened. The creature's blood and flesh would be his prize. A sudden, different kind of heat slammed into Quirrell's face. The luminous creature broke free of some restraint. Gold flame poured from it, pure and intense. The light in its eyes blazed with furious radiance. Quirrell smiled as he reached for a drop of that vital blood, certain his apparition would take him out before the flames reached him. But the shimmer of glassy light in the creature's eyes flared with blinding brightness. In an instant, Quirrell's figure froze, caught and held in a stillness that was not of his own making. 123. Burning, the unicorn child. The instant Quirrell's fingertip brushed the golden red drop of blood, a burning surge ran through his soul. It was like being plunged into boiling water and scalded from the inside out. Lord Voldemort had felt worse. After all, he'd endured countless dark arts transformations and the agony of tearing his soul to make Horcruxes. But even so, this burn was fierce. When the strange creature counterattacked and that wisp of golden flame appeared, Quirrell reacted on instinct and tried to apparet. He trusted his speed. As the flame reached for him, his form already began to blur, ready to fold through space. Then a numbing, oppressive solidity seized him, as if flowing space had frozen into ice. Like a fish that could no longer swim, he could not complete the move. For the first time in a long while, Quirrell was caught off guard. There was a faint sizzle. The tip of the flame seemed drawn to the blood drop. It latched onto it. The drop ruptured, feeding the fire, which lengthened and expanded, lashing across Quirrell's fingers, palm, and wrist. Pain exploded through him. If the first burn had been boiling water, this was molten lava. The agony clawed at his soul. The shock broke the paralysis. Quirrell flicked his wand and sent out an invisible blade. With a sharp swish, his entire arm was severed at the shoulder. The golden flame had already eaten the forearm, passed the elbow, and climbed toward the upper arm. Quirrell lashed out again. The upper arm detonated, spraying a curtain of burning flesh and blood that obscured him for a moment. His eyes darted to the wounded mare, covered in knife gashes, and he resolved to take the fetus's blood as a fallback, following his original plan. Black-red blood trickled from his eyes and nostrils. His magic faltered. "Damn it," he snarled. "This useless body." Without hesitation, he melted into a wisp of black smoke and shot upward, leaving the unicorns behind. He didn't spare them another glance. With his power draining so fast, lingering any longer would have meant being trapped by that creature. Lu Guang, who had seen Quirrell flee, was about to rise on a sprout of auspicious cloud and pursue when he stopped. He apparated to Selenea's side instead. Quickly, he conjured two balls of fire, crimson gold flames, the gold even more vivid than before, and set one over his own wound and the other over Selenea's shattered body. Where the flames touched Lu Guang's waist and abdomen, a black gas mixed with green miasma evaporated and burned away. Selenea's state, however, was far worse. Her body was lacerated from flank to flank, cuts of every depth. The deepest gash on her belly exposed something within. Lu Guang spat twice. 2 mouthfuls of Qilin saliva flew, one into Selenea's mouth and one toward the open wound on her abdomen. Toxic fumes hissed out as the saliva touched them. The wounds began to knit under its purifying influence. But the progress was agonizingly slow. The mixed venoms could not be purged by pure fire in an instant. They kept eating at her from the inside. Worse, Lu Guang's face tightened when he peered at the exposed contents of Selenea's belly. Her whimper was small and raw. He understood what she meant with the sound, and he didn't know what else to do. His child. Lu Guang split off a tiny auspicious cloud, plucked a single golden red drop of blood from his own wound, and guided it into Selenea's abdomen. It did something, stabilized the fetus briefly, but it could not be a lasting cure. He murmured to her, trying to soothe her panic. "It's okay. Hold on." Just a moment. He poured a great surge of pure fire through his body, intensifying the surrounding walls of flame until they became a dome sealing the sky. Then his form vanished. Seconds later he returned, accompanied by a young wizard tugging his robes into place. Lucien. Lucien drew his wand as Liu Guang quickly ran him through what had happened. The whole episode had taken no more than 3 to 5 minutes, but its danger was immense. Lucien's face went flat. He flicked his wand. Asterion, slumped nearby, floated over and settled by Selenea. It was rotten luck. There were many unicorns in the Forbidden Forest, and they had been the ones Voldemort had focused on. If Liu Guang hadn't happened on them now— Lucien glanced at the small Qilin, whose own wounds were almost closed. "Master," the Qilin said, "I'm fine. My wounds are nearly healed." "Master, check on Selenea. Her child too," the Qilin urged. Lucien nodded and crouched beside Selenea, examining the injuries. The cut themselves were straightforward enough to stitch, but the residue in the wounds told a darker story. It was the same nasty combination of potions and spells Quirrell had taught not long ago, a dark arts method. Lucien leveled his gaze, and black whirlpools spun in his irises as he called on his Eye of Peering magic to analyze the potion traces. The more he read them, the grimmer his expression became. This wasn't just a random mix of draughts. The assailant had used very specific ratios and a deliberate combination to create a complex corrosive compound. Selenea's injuries were only part of the catastrophe. Through the wide slash in her belly, Lucien could already see the fetus. A stab of helpless sadness flickered across his face. It could be saved, but barely. Liu Guang's drop of Qilin blood had bought some time, but too much Qilin life force would overwhelm the unborn foal, and Selenea, in her current condition, could not give birth unaided. This would require human intervention, a controlled extraction, and immediate medicinal care. Lucien drew a scrap of parchment from his pocket, tapped it with his wand, and a set of instructions and notes scrawled themselves on the page. He handed the paper to Liu Guang while continuing to apply healing charms. "Liu Guang," he said without hesitation, "go find Newt." Chapter 124, Quirrell's Choice. Newt arrives. In a small cabin in Dorset, Tina's voice floated down the hall. "Newt, are you done?" Newt answered quickly. "All right, love, I'm coming to bed." He flicked his wand. The damp stains on his coat vanished. It had been hippocampi mating season, and he'd been running between pens all day to keep them from turning the water world upside down and spilling into the surrounding spaces. "Mr. Newt!" At the familiar call, a warm, golden figure materialized before him. Newt was a little surprised that Liu Guang hadn't knocked. Smiling, he asked, "Oh, Liu Guang, did Lucien send you again?" Liu Guang interrupted, urgent. "Mr. Newt, the unicorn in the Forbidden Forest." He handed Newt a sheet that glowed faintly like an auspicious cloud. Newt scanned it in a heartbeat. "Unicorn, labor, severe injury," he murmured. He tapped his wand, and a trench coat floated onto his shoulders. A plain brown leather briefcase rose into his hand. He was already preparing to apparate for the Forbidden Forest when Liu Guang stepped forward and Newt simply vanished. Down the corridor, Tina rubbed her eyes and padded into the sitting room after a moment. "Where is he?" she muttered, noticing the empty chair. "Newt, go to bed early after you've finished with the hippocampi." Silence answered her. Somewhere deep in the Forbidden Forest, green flames cast a sickly light across a cold cave. Quirrell sat propped against the stone, expressionless as he used his wand to staunch the blood at the stump where his arm had been severed. He peeled a silver-white, viscous film from his robes and mask. The substance coalesced into a pearlescent orb that hovered in the air. A raw, hoarse scream tore from his throat. The pain wasn't only from the missing limb. The sorcery that had been forcibly drawn from his flesh and blood was shredding him, as if his very soul were being kneaded and ripped. He sagged against the wall, fighting for breath. "Drink it." Lord Voldemort's voice echoed inside his head, flat, commanding, utterly indifferent. Quirrell looked at the floating orb, its mercury-like sheen seeming to crawl. He knew unicorn blood's terrible bargain. It would prolong a crippled life, but at the cost of a curse, a half-dead existence. He had planned for so much. This night was a catastrophe. The scheme to obtain the blood of the unicorn fetus had failed. When a strange creature had appeared, Voldemort had altered the plan to demand its blood instead. The result had been even worse. Quirrell had to sacrifice his own flesh and draw his life close to the edge, and the magic gained hadn't even yielded the intended healing. He had not secured the creature's blood. Perhaps he could not have handled it at all without rupturing under the contact's pain. Now only the male unicorn's blood remained. Quirrell had traded an arm for a few more ragged breaths and the certainty of a cursed life. Voldemort's voice offered no sympathy. Find another body if this one failed. Restart from elsewhere. Voldemort could afford to wait. Quirrell could not. The green flames guttered and died. Time blurred. A faint swallowing sound echoed in the cave. Inside a crimson gold barrier, deeper in the forest, Lucien worked with a dozen delicate threads of magic, stitching wounds and coaxing life back into battered flesh. He used the vitality of the Chillin's saliva to accelerate healing on Selenea and the child. Asterion paced beside him, anxious. His throat had been cut, and he had bled heavily, but he had not been poisoned by dark arts, so under the Chillin's aid he could already move. He lowered his head and touched Selenea's great horn mournfully. Lucien wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. The potion's still the problem, Lucien said. This compound toxin is too difficult to clear. And the fetus, aside from the physical trauma, its magic circuit is damaged. How could that even happen? The vitality in Chillin blood exceeds that of the saliva, but it seems useless for repairing the magic circuit. Lucien paused, sensing motion at the edge of the ward. The little Chillin, small, shimmering, materialized at the barrier's rim. Beside it stood a tall, thin man with curly hair in a worn trench coat. Asterion lifted his head. The horn's pale light flared in reaction. "Asterion," Lucien called soothingly, and explained the newcomer's presence. The unicorn relaxed and inclined his head toward the man. Newt didn't waste time on introductions. He knelt beside Selenea and transformed his wand into a trumpet-like instrument, the wide end pressed to the unicorn's abdomen, the narrow end to his ear. After a moment of listening, he spoke rapidly. "The fetus is full term. It could be time to deliver today, but Selenea is in too poor a state for a natural birth." He pointed to the long, deep wound across Selenea's abdomen. "The fetus's situation is worse. We can't wait. We'll have to perform a cesarean here." "Mother and child, treated separately," he added. Lucien nodded. "Is there anything I can do?" Newt's briefcase opened on its own. A compact workbench flew out, followed by vials, jars, and a full kit for brewing and preparing potions. He uncorked bottles, measured powders, and applied compounds to Selenea's wounds while feeding other draughts by mouth. Without looking up, he said, "Please help me brew several more potions. The steps are—" Lucien set to work at the bench. "Mr. Newt," Lucien said after a moment, voice tight, "the fetus's magic circuit, there's a clear break." Newt's hands stilled. His face went hard for an instant. "This," he swallowed, "repairing a magic circuit. I've never seen anything like this." Hearing Newt's words, Lucien felt his heart sink. Magic circuits were too complex and obscure. Not every wizard studied them. Over time, he had picked up fragments of knowledge. The Weasleys' family spellbooks described ways to boost spell power by developing a wizard's own circuitry, useful for combat, but entirely different from the circuits of magical creatures. Greengrass's treatise, Bloodline and Talent, touched deeply on magic circuits, but focused on increasing the chance that a fetus would inherit excellent circuitry through potions and spells, relevant only during development, not for a creature already fully formed. Quirrell had shown him a few things too, but there hadn't been time to master the core material. He had used the Eye of Peering magic to observe the circuits of many wizards and creatures, collecting samples, but the knowledge was scattered and never coalesced into a usable system. Repairing the little unicorn's damaged circuits like that was impossible in the short term. Lucien frowned, tending the potion Newt needed while he frantically searched his mind for a solution. If nothing worked, he'd have to call old Dumbledore. Even if the greatest wizard of the century wasn't omnipotent, he was still— Ding! Loan-triggered magic weaving art. "Would you like to take out the loan?" The system's voice startled him, but his hands didn't stop. Annual loan? He'd triggered this highest-level loan again. The name alone made his pulse quicken, an extraordinary technique for modifying the magic circuits of magical creatures, exactly what he needed. The potion was in its final simmering stage. He watched it while pulling up the loan details. Repayment magic weaving arts. Loan content, an extraordinary technique for modifying the magic circuits of magical creatures involving transfiguration, alchemy, potion, and dark arts. Lone task, cultivate a dragon to become the king of its species. Lucien's surprise flared. Modifying magic circuits, if he could alter them, repairing the unicorn's circuits should be possible. But it was an annual loan. Its power would be vast, and its cost likely steep. He thought of Loki's Faceless and the little Keelan, both annual loans, and how useful they had been. Still, such loans came with difficult, long-term tasks. This one required cultivating a dragon into the king of its species. He queried the system. How is the king of a dragon species defined? Does species mean a single type of dragon? Dragons came in many types, 10 common kinds, rare hybrids, even land-dwelling breeds, so he needed precision. Dragons only submit to the strong. The strongest in a species is the king. A single distinct type counts as a species. So it came down to strength. Raise an overwhelmingly powerful dragon and have it dominate its peers. Lucien asked, how will it be considered cultivated by me? Firstly, this dragon needs to obey the host's discipline. The host must provide a growth environment, food, combat training, and accompany it for over half a year. In short, tame it, feed and shelter it, train it in combat, and maintain a bond for over 6 months. It was basically being a dragon trainer. That was normally a Herculean task. Taming an adult dragon was near impossible. A hatchling was ideal. But Hagrid was due to acquire a dragon egg in the original timeline. Even if that egg didn't stay long in the real world, Lucien could raise a hatchling safely in his gourd space, where others wouldn't find it. Malfoy would be the one to report Hagrid in the original story, and the chances of that kid sniffing out something in Lucien's private space were slim. With his animal affinity and the little Chillin's help, raising a dragon from young wasn't out of reach. Teaching a dragon to become supreme was daunting, but teaching was teaching. Students didn't have to be human. The Chillin had learned well, after all. System, I want to borrow magic weaving art, annual loan. He justified the choice. The loan could save the little unicorn, and the task's difficulty was manageable. Besides, if he couldn't repay the loan on time, the system would only reclaim the borrowed knowledge or items. It wouldn't erase the effects he'd already produced. No matter what, he would try to save the unicorn first. If he had a system and refused to use its loopholes, what was the point of being a host? Loan, magic weaving art, annual loan, has been successfully applied. Evaluation. A certain being who was very fond of this skill once said, I just wanted to make this world a bit more interesting with creatures, but a bunch of scoundrels dared to spread rumors that I gave birth to them. I should turn those guys into sheep. Before Lucien could digest the evaluation, a vast torrent of knowledge surged into his mind. The influx was brutal. His head split with pain, veins standing at his temples, cold sweat pouring down his face. He bit back a sound, and hands trembling, finished brewing the potion. The new knowledge was the most complex he'd ever received. An intricate weave of transfiguration and potion expertise, dense alchemical methods, spells, and even dark arts applications. After staggering through the initial overload and sorting the core pieces, he grasped the immediate requirements. First, brew a potion to calm magical creatures, stabilize their souls, and repair their internal magic circuits to enable further operations. It was not purely a potion. Alchemical methods would be necessary, and transfiguration and specialized spells would follow. Lucien rubbed his throbbing temples and pulled a stiff cardboard card from his pocket, the permit with Albus Dumbledore's signature. He glanced down as realization struck. He needed someone on the outside who would trust the Keelan. He called the little Chillin over and handed it the special permit. Show this. They'll believe you. Go quickly, he urged. After the Chillin darted off, Lucien picked up the still-warm potion from the workbench and moved beside Newt, crouching to offer it. Mr. Scamander, the potion you needed. Newt nodded, took the vial, uncorked it, and inspected the brew. He frowned in concentration, then relaxed. This potion is good and very timely. The female unicorn's condition is temporarily stable. We can begin to receive. Are you all right? Newt cut off, eyeing Lucien's ashen face and bloodless lips. You look unwell. Lucien waved a hand. I'm fine, Mr. Scamander. What should I do next? Saving Selenea and the others is the priority. Newt said with firm resolve. Inside the forbidden forest, a shimmering figure appeared as silently as a shadow. Beside it stood a tall, silver-haired man with a matching silver beard, dressed in deep purple pajamas and a sleeping cap. In less than half a second, a ball of crimson flame flared in midair, and a magnificent, bright red phoenix burst from it. After circling once, it hovered over the fallen unicorn. 2 clear tears fell, drip, drop, one to the unicorn's forehead, the other to its abdomen. Fox, Lucien and Newt both looked up at the familiar phoenix and saw Dumbledore standing beside the shimmering creature. They exchanged no words, only slight nods, then turned back to Selenea's Caesarean. Dumbledore's face was grave as he listened to the strange being and quickly absorbed the information it relayed. Waking an elderly headmaster in the middle of the night was remarkable enough. Learning what the creature had told him was even more so. The creature's account, corroborated by the special permit Lucien carried, convinced Dumbledore. The creature had transported him from his office at Hogwarts to the Forbidden Forest by a method like apparition, unhindered by the castle's wards and even faster than Fawkes. Seeing Lucien and his old friend Newt by the injured unicorn confirmed Dumbledore was not dreaming. He moved to the wounded animal and drew his uniquely shaped Elder Wand. Asterion, the nearby unicorn, did not bristle. The shimmering figure had already explained everything to him. Spells flowed from the tip of the Elder Wand, some diagnostic, some to clear distractions so Lucien and Newt could work. Dumbledore quickly understood the situation, fitting the creature's tail into place with what he observed. With a flicker in his bright blue eyes, he went to the table where potion tools were spread out. One motion of his wand and extra ingredients appeared on the wood. He began arranging and processing them with practiced movements. He intended to brew a potion to detoxify the female unicorn. Back at the incision, the Caesarean had passed its most dangerous phase. Lucien realized his immediate help was no longer required. Newt could finish the rest alone. "Mr. Newt, I need to prepare treatment for the foal," Lucien said simply. Newt's hands never stopped, but his eyes were wet with a sadness he didn't show. He understood the newborn's condition. They were working as much to preserve Selenea's life as to save the foal. The severing of its magic circuit would inflict terrible pain, and repairing it would be even more difficult. Still, hearing the determination in Lucien's voice, Newt did not voice the harsh truth, and he too hoped for a miracle. "Go ahead. I'll take care of this," Newt managed. Lucien rose and crossed to the workbench. "Headmaster, I would like to borrow the Philosopher's Stone." Before he finished, the familiar translucent red gem materialized. "Do what you intend to do," Dumbledore replied. Lucien placed the Philosopher's Stone on the table. With the stone, the pinnacle of alchemy, integrated into brewing, the potion would take far less time and its effects would last longer. Time was life. He drew a small purple gourd from his pouch, waved his wand, and his workbench rose to hover beside him. In his head, he ran over the steps of the weaving technique he was about to use. First, combine alchemy and potion methods to create Moon Soul Water, a potion designed to soothe magical creatures, stabilize their souls, and mend magic circuits. Second, a dark arts spell could be used to tear apart an opponent's magic circuit, but that step could be skipped here. The foal's circuit was already fractured. The third step was the most crucial, a precise application of transfiguration, in which the wizard's own magic would be used to mimic part of the creature's internal circuit and gently guide and reshape it. This was the most delicate, most difficult part, and would decide success or failure. The final step would be the longest. Constant spells and potions to stabilize the newly formed circuit. He looked up at the moon and let the cool light wash over him. The moonlight would be enough. Lucien drew Asterion close. "I need your blood to save your child." "This must be of your own free will," the shimmering figure translated. Asterion nodded without hesitation. Lucien made a small, clean incision across the unicorn's chest with a precise flick of his wand and held a jade plate beneath it, catching viscous, silvery white blood. He scanned it with his eye of peering magic for curses and breathed out with relief when he detected none. Moon Soul Water required the blood of that species as a raw ingredient. It did not strictly have to be the mother's blood, but it had to be given willingly. Forced samples carried curses. most strongly in the blood, particularly among unicorns. When there was enough, Lucien staunched Asterian's wound and handed the jade plate to the shimmering figure. Fly as high as you can. Let the moonlight touch the blood until blue circular spots appear. Be careful of the temperature. Do not let it freeze, the creature warned. It split a cloud of auspicious mist to support the plate and shot skyward. Lucien turned back to his preparations and waited while the blood soaked in moonlight. He cut, ground, and measured complex ingredients, asking Dumbledore when a rare component was needed. The old headmaster produced whatever he asked for with a small, tired smile. A faint, insectile cry reached Lucien's ears. Newt held a golden foal in his arms. The newborn tried to open its eyes but could not. Lucien worked the herbs, waiting for the system's prompt. He was supposed to return a borrowed circuit tracing tablet by completing a task, witness a memorable birth. He had not yet received the loan repaid notification. The system's description of the task echoed in his mind. The moment life fully descends into the world, contacting the world in the form of a newborn. The lack of a prompt told him what his own eyes nearly confirmed. The foal was not yet fully entered into life. Its magic circuit flickered, growing dim, but it still clung to the spark. Maybe it was the Chelan blood, maybe the phoenix tears, maybe the foal's own will to live. Lucien's hands moved faster and more methodically than ever. Time was bleeding away, but it wasn't over yet. When 27, circuit repair, loan repayment. Inside the forbidden forest, bathed in moonlight, the little Chelan drifted down on a faint yellow auspicious cloud. The jade plate it carried settled onto Lucien's workbench with a soft thud. "Master, is this all right?" Lucien glanced at the plate. The silver-white blood within had developed small blue rings on its surface, surprisingly uniform, slowly drifting in the fluid. Good." He tapped his wand and measured out exactly 500 milliliters of the blood, letting it fly into the cauldron. Following the recipe to the letter, Lucien added each prepared ingredient with precise motions. He took up the Philosopher's Stone and breathed deeply. He had practiced brewing potions with the stone under Dumbledore's supervision before, but never to completion. He looked toward the little Chelan. Through the eye of peering magic, its magic circuit showed even dimmer patches. The normal process would be too slow. He had to use the Philosopher's Stone. Sometimes he floated the stone above the cauldron, letting it gather moonlight into a faint red glow that shone into the brew. Sometimes he dropped it into the solution and removed it after a measured stir. Other times, he set it in the flames to change their color and properties. Lucien moved through each step of making the moon soul water with careful, ordered hands. Urgent though it was, there could be no mistake. He was already using the Philosopher's Stone to save time. He could not speed up further. A single wrong move in potion making could reduce effectiveness, ruin the brew, or even turn a beneficial potion poisonous. Time ticked by. Then a small chime sounded in Lucien's mind. Ding, Chelan, annual loan, has been repaid. Relief poured out of him. The Chelan, annual loan task had required brewing a potion using the Philosopher's Stone. It had to be fully and successfully completed. Done. He checked the blue-white liquid in the cauldron against the description one last time, then poured the moon soul water into a potion bottle and hurried over to Newt. Newt was doing his best to care for Selenea and her child. Selenea, a mature unicorn, was stable. Her body had steadying factors, and the complex toxins were being countered by the many potions Dumbledore had prepared, but she still needed the remaining toxins cleared. The little Chelan's condition, however, had grown worse. Its weak cries were now intermittent. "Mr. Newt, let me," Lucien said. He took the little Chelan gently from Newt's arms. Its body was already cool to the touch. Lucien didn't hesitate. He tipped the bottle and let the moon soul water flow into the creature's mouth. "Don't be afraid. It'll be okay." He soothed the trembling animal with soft pats. The potion took effect. The little Chelan stopped trembling, and its ragged breathing steadied. The calming and soul-soothing properties worked. Lucien's eye of peering magic whirled as he examined the creature's magic circuit. The circuit had stabilized. Time for the next step. He raised his wand and pointed at the little Chelan's back, near the lower abdomen where the magic circuit was most clearly broken. A soft whimper of pain reached Lucien's ears. Selenea struggled to lift her neck and stand. Several wounds reopened, and silver-white blood dripped down. Newt tried to stop her from moving, but she kept rising, staring at Lucien and at her child with a look of pleading so human he felt compelled to soothe her with a few quiet words. "It's all right. The child will be fine." He didn't need to use the Lumina translation. Selenea seemed to understand. She trembled, but remained nearby as Lucien prepared to perform the magic weaving technique. Dumbledore, having finished the final potions, came to Selenea's side. He handed some brews to Newt and explained their uses. Seeing them working together on the mother and detoxification, Lucien's concern on that front eased. Lucien raised his silver-black wand. Hair-thin filaments of magic extended from its tip. The second step of the magic weaving technique normally called for destroying the creature's original circuit. But Lucien didn't need that. He needed to repair the little Cheelin's circuit and mask his own magic as part of it. If he could imitate and disguise his magic as the circuit, it might greatly aid his attempts at transfiguring magical creatures. If he could simulate, perhaps he could also create. He refined his control until the filaments split into even finer threads, like strands of silk. Dumbledore's beard twitched as he watched, surprised at Lucien's progress, and yet the sight felt somehow inevitable. Lucien guided the threads to pierce the Cheelin's skin, weave between muscle fibers, and reach the area around the stabilized circuit. A unicorn's, or Cheelin's, magic circuit is normally a closed loop with magic flowing uninterrupted. This little one's circuit had been broken like a snapped violin string, the flow bleeding away instead of continuing. Holding his breath, Lucien focused every ounce of concentration on the threads. "Simulate, disguise," he whispered to himself. His talent for transfiguration revealed itself. At the end of a thread, he began an almost microscopic transfiguration, subtly twisting and reconfiguring magic at the tip, shaping it into the pure, sacred fluctuations characteristic of unicorn magic. It was like sewing a seam in a storm, requiring staggering precision. Sweat beaded at his forehead, and his arms trembled with the strain. The transfigured thread became a delicate bridge, and a tentative wisp of unicorn magic edged forward along it, like a trickle down a channel. The instant the magic entered the other end of the broken circuit cleanly, joy flared in Lucien's eyes. It was possible. He wove more threads, more chains connecting the two ends, until a small riverbed formed. The scattered magic within the little Cheelin's body began to flow through this unfamiliar channel. Under Lucien's guidance, the flow strengthened. The creature's own vitality seemed to wake and feed into the reopened channel, reinforcing it. "Lumina, give me another drop of blood." Lumina answered immediately. Its lower abdomen wound had long since healed. It gently bit the tip of its tongue and let a single drop of golden-red blood ride an auspicious cloud to Lucien. He drew a thin wisp from that drop and threaded it through the wound on the Cheelin's back. At once, Lucien perceived a delicate new circuit forming in the original place, like a newborn vine, faintly glowing with pure light. He slowly withdrew his artificial threads. The nascent circuit held. Lucien let out a long, quiet breath. He moved on to repair other damaged sections. The work went faster now, some injuries were less severe, and he had grown more practiced. As the moon moved across the sky, Lucien felt his reserves of magic being drained, coming close to exhaustion. A soft chime sounded again. "Ding circuit tablet has been repaid." Another message followed, warm and official in tone. "Congratulations to the host for witnessing a memorable birth of life." 128. Unicorn Blessing, Aurora. The little unicorn's soft whinny echoed through the forbidden forest. Lucien sheathed his wand and carried the foal to Selenea. Most of the toxins had been purged from the mare's body, and her wounds were healing much faster. She lowered her head and gently licked her baby, clear tears gathering in her eyes. Lucien set the foal on the ground. It tottered on unsteady legs for a few breaths, then found its balance and nestled against its mother. Its large, wet eyes never left Lucien, full of unmistakable affection. Selenea straightened, then slowly pressed the unicorn horn on her forehead to the back of Lucien's left hand. A faint silvery white glow uncoiled from the spiraled horn and wrapped around his skin. Selenea stepped back. Asterion stepped forward and performed the same gesture. A brighter light flowed from his longer, straighter horn to Lucien's hand. The two auras braided together, condensed and merged into a small spiraled unicorn totem on the back of his hand, so faint it was visible only in the moonlight. It radiated a calm, sacred warmth. The unicorn's blessing, Newt murmured nearby, uncertainty in his voice. Lucien looked down at the pattern and asked, curious, "Mr. Newt, what is the unicorn's blessing?" Dumbledore, watching too, waited for Newt's answer. In the world of magical creatures, his old friend was an encyclopedia of living knowledge. Newt's eyes moved between Lucien's hand and the unicorn's. Relief and satisfaction softened his expression. Unicorns seldom interact with humans, and when they do, they're more inclined toward females. That's their nature, except in rare circumstances, he said. He regarded Lucien with a hint of surprise. This young man had already shown an unusual familiarity with unicorns, even observing the signs of a pregnant mare. But even if a unicorn lets a human approach, it will never allow anyone to touch its horn. That's an absolute taboo. If a unicorn willingly touches someone with its horn, it confers a blessing. 3 principal effects: beast speech, pure aura, and healing heart. He explained each in turn. Beast speech lets you form an instant rapport with animals and communicate with them without barriers. Pure aura repels filth automatically. Dust, bloodstains, and other grime no longer stick to you, and it also grants you greater resistance to curses and poisons than ordinary people. Healing Heart amplifies the effects of any healing magic you receive, and it makes your own healing work more potent. Lucien's mind began to run through possibilities. Beast speech overlapped with the animal affinity he had as the master of the Qilin, but unhindered, direct communication would be invaluable. He could rely on Luguang to translate or shift into his animagus form, but he planned to raise a dragon later. Being able to speak to creatures directly would be far more convenient. Pure Aura's resistance to curses and toxins could buy him crucial time in a crisis, and the idea of filth literally not sticking to him sounded like a small but welcome boon to save time he could spend reading and studying. Healing Heart would make both treating others and recovering himself more effective. The unicorn's blessing was, by any measure, impressive. "May I try the blessing's effects?" Lucien asked. "Of course," Newt said, smiling. "To be honest, I'm curious too. This is the first time I've seen a unicorn blessing in person. I've only read about it in ancient texts." Lucien turned to the unicorn pair and spoke softly. "This child will need ongoing care. Could she stay with me for now? I will take good care of her." Even without Luguang to translate, Asterion and Selenea understood. Immediately, 2 voices, clear, calm, communicated directly to him in his mind. "We sincerely thank you for your help. You gave our child new life. Your willingness to continue her care is a blessing." The sensation was much like communicating in his animagus form, but more natural and effortless. Lucien had initially repaired the foal's magic circuits, but the magic weaving technique required further spells and potions to fully stabilize them. He could provide that care. "By the way," he said, "may I give her a name?" They consented without hesitation. Lucien considered names, thinking of meanings, when a faint light crept across the horizon, the first hint of dawn. He looked up and smiled. "Let's call her Aurora," he said, "for dawn and for new life." The Forbidden Forest at dawn. Lucien smiled and looked down at the newborn. "How about Luguang? Do you like that name, or would you rather change it?" I really like it," the foal stammered. It was still clumsy with words, fresh from the world, yet it tried its best to show its joy. Aurora, the mother, padded slowly over, and Lucien took a couple of careful steps forward, worried she might stumble. Mimicking her elders, the little one pressed its short horn against Lucien's hand and rubbed gently. Because it was so young, no blessed glow emanated from it yet, but the gesture made Lucien grin all the same. "Newt, this scene is truly beautiful, isn't it?" Dumbledore murmured, watching the exchange. He dabbed at his eye as he adjusted his glasses. "The birth of life. There's something about new beginnings." Newt Scamander ran his palms together, still feeling the tremor of the night's events. He had delivered countless magical creatures, but nothing had quite matched tonight. He'd performed a C-section on a unicorn, watched this young boy pull off a feat that had saved a life, and witnessed what felt like a miracle. And then Lucien had received the unicorn's blessing, a rarity, a near-historic rarity. Newt believed Lucien had a particular bond with magical creatures. Lucien would be perfectly suited for work with magical beasts, he said quietly. Dumbledore, who knew Newt well, smiled. What? Are you angling for him to take over your position when you retire? Newt laughed. You never know. Lucien also seems to have a talent for teaching. He might well end up at Hogwarts. It will depend on what he wants, Newt added. By the way, Dumbledore asked, leaning in a little, what did he say he'd like to do during his career guidance in 5th year? Newt blinked. Dumbledore's question left him a little flummoxed. He couldn't predict the future. How could he possibly know what a student would say years from now? I don't know, he admitted. Newt turned his gaze toward Lucien, who was still fussing over the foal. He'd been a trifle disappointed that Lucien wasn't in Hufflepuff. After all, Newt thought Hogwarts the finest school and Hufflepuff the finest house. But that did nothing to diminish his admiration for this Ravenclaw. Lucien was learned, kind, and at ease around creatures. He was also very handsome. And his age, Newt had assumed a 6th or 7th year, someone with years of study behind him. Now that the urgent business was done, Newt had time to look more closely. Lucien didn't resemble a 16 or 17-year-old at all. He looked, at most, much younger. Dumbledore, Newt said, suddenly curious, what year is Lucien in now? Inside the headmaster's office later that morning, Dumbledore, Newt, and Lucien sat around the table. Small cakes were laid out beside a pot of black tea. Do try them all, Dumbledore urged, lifting his cup. A cup of strong tea in the morning with something sweet can chase away any lingering fatigue. Lucien and Newt didn't hesitate. After a long night, a sugar rush felt entirely appropriate. They watched as Liu Guang, the little Qilin Lucien had named, played on a pale yellow cloud while Fawkes perched nearby. Dumbledore's eyes crinkled with pleasure. Hey, Liu Guang, right? Would you like to try this lemon cake? I highly recommend it. Thank you, Headmaster Dumbledore, Lucien said, and Liu Guang used a small curl of cloud to lift a slice to his mouth and take a delicate taste. Fawkes showed no interest. The Phoenix had seen many confections over the years and found them tiresome. Still, Liu Guang's soft, ethereal voice echoed directly in Dumbledore's mind, and the headmaster could not hide his surprise. Lucien, I didn't expect you to have such a magical companion. To be honest, I think Liu Guang's a remarkable creature, no less special than Fawkes, Lucien replied. Dumbledore glanced from Liu Guang to Newt. The red phoenix was poking at the little cloud with its beak, apparently curious about its texture. What species is Liu Guang? I don't recall such a creature in our records. Lucien set his spoon down and answered plainly, as he had told Newt earlier. A Qilin. Liu Guang is a Qilin. A Qilin? Dumbledore repeated, struck anew. He remembered Qilin well. Grindelwald had once tried to bend a Qilin to his will in pursuit of his goals, and Newt had intervened with another true Qilin to stop him. But Liu Guang bore little resemblance to the deer-like Qilin Dumbledore recalled. This little creature carried a majesty that was almost otherworldly, and its abilities were unlike anything Dumbledore had seen. Flying on golden clouds, apparating around Hogwarts with no trouble, blood and saliva brimming with astonishing vitality. Qilin were known to sense minds and distinguish good from evil, selecting rulers fit to lead. Dumbledore himself had once been chosen by a Qilin and had declined the mantle. But Liu Guang's traits put him in a different class. Liu Guang seems to differ from ordinary Qilin, Dumbledore observed. Newt took a sip of his unsweetened tea and offered his view. Perhaps it's a powerful, beneficial mutation. There's still so much about magical creatures we don't understand. Magic surprises us. New forms can appear when least expected. And with that extraordinary vitality in its blood and saliva, Newt added more seriously, Liu Guang could easily attract those with ill intent. Lucien felt a surge of gratitude toward Newt. If Newt called something a magical creature, that was usually the end of the matter. If he suggested it was a mutation, Newt's word carried weight. Dumbledore nodded gravely in agreement. I understand. Don't worry. Hogwarts is safe. With me here, no one will harm Lucien or Liu Guang. Such a promise mattered coming from the most powerful wizard in the world. Lucien forced a small smile, but inwardly, he couldn't help but brood. Hogwarts might be the safest place under Dumbledore's protection, except, he thought, for one child. Harry, Chapter 130, Newt's reaction, wanting to see the acromantula. They were in the headmaster's office. Lucien sat with the two older men, drinking tea and chatting. Lucien felt that little Cheelin no longer needed to be hidden as carefully as it had at the start of the school year. Without openly displaying it, he no longer feared discovery the way he once did. Little Cheelin's apparition had always been exceptional, both faster and capable of farther jumps than is normal, and not constrained in the usual ways. In the fight with the hooded man, it had awakened a new ability. At a critical moment, it could solidify a patch of space, trapping the area so others could not use spatial movement like apparition. In short, little Cheelin could get away now, and even if an enemy tried to pursue, they might find themselves unable to leave. Lucien understood that the creature's chances of survival had increased dramatically. Little Cheelin was still growing. Its size and strength were increasing fast, practically on a monthly basis. It had started about the size of a war horse. Now it was at least as big as a camel. Its scales were hardening, its magic resistance rising, and the temperature threshold of its pure flame kept climbing. The encounter with Quirrell had pushed little Cheelin's pure flame past a breakthrough. Lucien reckoned that, left to fight freely, little Cheelin could take on elite Aurors without much trouble. The only question was how many at once. Aurors were the very best of the wizarding world. Few would dare hunt a dragon, after all, and dragons did not teleport away or suddenly block a doorway in the night and set a fire. Lucien, your way of treating that little unicorn, Aurora, was very clever, Newt said. Repairing a magical circuit, Dumbledore added, is not something I've heard of being done like that. Newt gave a wry smile and looked at Lucien's handsome, still youthful face, then sighed softly. And your age is what truly surprises me. Lucien was a first year, only half a year at Hogwarts, and had come from a muggle family, Dumbledore had told them. He had never met magic before starting school. The news hit Newt harder than he expected. Dumbledore soothed him. Nothing is strange in the world of magic. Each generation has its prodigies. Dumbledore said no more, though he had seen further than Newt. In the crucial steps of the repair, Lucien must have used transfiguration techniques. Even more startling, he had used his own magic to influence the magical circuit of a magical beast. Part of why many magical beasts resist wizarding magic and why transfiguration cannot create true magical beasts is the incompatibility between magical circuits. Lucien's work had, to some degree, broken that rule. Dumbledore could only chalk it up to the unpredictability of magic and the boy's talent. Unlike Muggle science, magical methods aren't always fixed formulas. With enough accumulation and strong will, new magic can emerge. How Lucien exactly repaired the unicorn circuit was left unsaid. Both Dumbledore and Newt respected the child's secret. After a while, they chatted more. Then Lucien and Newt took their leave. As they walked out of the headmaster's office, Newt turned to Lucien. Could you do me a favor? Let little Cheelin take us to the Forbidden Forest. I want to have a look. We could walk from the castle, but there are lots of students and teachers about. If they see me... Lucien hesitated, awkward with social situations. He had learned to brace for recognition and the chaotic enthusiasm of students who idolized Newt. Lucien remembered how much children adored Newt. Any sudden sighting could attract half the school. Newt's expression showed he understood. Of course, it's no trouble. Lucien summoned little Cheelin. The creature appeared instantly, took them both up, and vanished down the corridor. In the next instant, they reappeared in the edges of the Forbidden Forest. So quick, and no jolt or anything, Newt said, marveling at little Cheelin's apparition. He hadn't noticed the nuances the night he'd rushed from home. By the way, the magical beast automatic feeder you sent me for Christmas was very interesting and useful. Thank you, Newt added. I'm glad you like it. I made it myself. It's handy in everyday use, Lucien replied, pleased. Newt nodded, smiling. Sometimes it gets overwhelming. Also, Lucien went on, do you mind if I show you the undetectable extension charm container I told you about? I keep some of my magical beasts there. Lucien had no objections when Newt asked to see it. He produced a white gourd, stationed little Cheelin outside as a guard, and led Newt inside. After looking the place over, Newt offered a few small suggestions for improving the container's undetectable extension charms. He checked the beasts Lucien kept, Puffskein and Mooncalf among them, and found them all in good health. Newt felt reassured. The unicorn's blessing had touched the boy, and he would likely have an easier time tending magical creatures. Having watched Lucien save the unicorn, Newt could sense his sincerity and kindness. He truly believed Lucien was well suited to the work of a magizoologist. As they were about to leave the gourd space, Newt mentioned casually, "Oh, when I came to the Forbidden Forest, I also wanted to see the Acromantula colony. I heard there's a sizable one here." A hollow in the Forbidden Forest. Aragog, as large as an elephant, paced his domain. His grayish-white hide had deepened into a glossy purple. The bases of his bristles had darkened from white to black. A clear light now shone in all 8 of his eyes, nothing like the dull, dim gaze he'd had only a few months ago. Hunger gnawed at him, and he shook his massive head, ready to hunt. Where once his descendants brought him prey, now, with his strength restored and his sight sharpened, Aragog hunted for himself. He loved the stalking, the chase. With vitality flooding him, he would no longer resign himself to that dark, boring cave. "How have you been doing lately, Aragog?" The voice behind him was familiar, and Aragog did not startle. He turned his bulk with surprising speed. His mandibles clicked together, making a hoarse, metallic sound. "Thank you for asking, Lucien," he rasped. "I've been very well lately." Every week or two, Lucien gave Aragog a drop of a crystal-clear liquid. Aragog did not know its name, only the way it filled him with renewed life. After he had decayed into decrepitude, the drops had brought him back to health. No creature could refuse the feeling of vigor returning. Lucien nodded. "That's good." From the way Aragog had steadily recovered, Lucien concluded that regular doses of Chelan saliva could restore vitality. If it were Chelan blood, the effect would likely be even stronger. A little force to begin with, followed by rewards, an effective method to make even an Acromantula more compliant. Newt, standing nearby, watched the great elderly Acromantula. Judging from his features and size, Newt estimated Aragog had lived for at least 40 years. Yet the spider moved with agility and quickness, far from the decrepit state expected of an Acromantula at that age. In Newt's experience, they began to decline after 30. By 40, they were usually old and frail. And Aragog's manner was unusually gentle, remarkable for a species notorious for cruelty and danger to both wizards and magical beasts. Seeing that even an Acromantula could show goodwill toward this boy only strengthened Newt's conviction about Lucien. Accompanied by Lucien, Newt spoke briefly with Aragog about his range, diet, and the size of his colony. Aragog then led them on a tour of his territory, and Newt saw Acromantulas of every age. Now, he better understood how Lucien had been able to record such detailed observations. An Acromantula colony of that scale in the Forbidden Forest, developing in a few decades, was unprecedented in Scotland. After they left the hollow, Newt and Lucien continued searching the forest for other magical beasts, chatting as they went. "Mr. Newt, what do you think of these Acromantulas?" Lucien asked. "They're thriving," Newt replied, "and the colony is growing too well, too big." Lucien understood. Acromantulas were dangerous predators and a threat to the forest's other inhabitants. What Newt did not initially know, but Lucien did, was that Aragog and his mate had been released into the Forbidden Forest by Hagrid. They were, strictly speaking, an invasive species upsetting the local ecosystem. "So you mean to relocate them to their original habitat?" Lucien asked. Newt nodded, then shook his head. "For the sake of the forest, yes, but not all at once." They talked the matter over, and when Newt suggested Lucien help monitor the colony and assist with relocation, Lucien agreed readily. He already visited Aragog often to observe the effects of the Chelan saliva, so he was effectively doing monitoring work. He had even adopted a few Acromantulas himself, partly to collect venom and partly to control their numbers and slow the colony's expansion. Now that Newt supported the idea, Lucien was eager to help. Newt was pleased. He had his own hope that Lucien, once involved, might take up magical creature protection long-term. Newt had long since gotten over the fact that Lucien was only a first year. He had come to see his talent clearly. Dumbledore had said Lucien would make a good teacher. Newt did not fully understand that, but in the field of magical creatures, Lucien was unquestionably valuable. Teaching was important, but there were many creatures that needed protection as well. Newt had pushed the laws for magical creature welfare forward, but successors were needed. "Mr. Newt, I hear you care for many magical creatures," Lucien said. May I have the honor of observing them? I'm very interested in these beasts. Newt's case contained an absurd number of magical animals. Lucien wanted to study creature transfiguration and needed examples of varied magical circuits. The best way, he believed, was to observe and record many species. He produced a small slate from his pocket. Subtle black whirlpools appeared in his eyes. Newt was delighted. Curiosity was admirable. Of course, he said. Newt set the case down and clicked it open. A ladder extended from within. He climbed in first, then reached back to beckon Lucien. Oh, and bring Liu Guang along. He might like it. Lucien had planned to leave Liu Guang outside, but Newt's invitation was earnest and kindly, and he said nothing. They stepped into the case world, passing through a workshop stacked with tools, medicines, and food. Then the space opened suddenly, and a vast African savanna stretched out before them. A gentle breeze stirred the tall grasses. A prickle of warning ran through Lucien. He turned toward the source of danger. Atop a rocky outcrop lay a massive leopard-like creature, its fur bristling with raised spines, the air pouches around its throat slowly inflating and deflating. The huge animal, previously languid, had noticed the unfamiliar visitors, its dull black eyes fixed on Lucien. He narrowed his own eyes, the whirlpools in them spinning faster. Nundu, 132, Nangdu leopard, records of looping monuments. Newt's suitcase world smelled of damp earth and strange things. The Nundu walked forward with a grace that belied its massive bulk, each step silent as a cat's. Lucien tightened his stance. This was a Class XNetX magical beast, probably the most dangerous one alive. Its breath alone could spread fatal diseases. It could wipe out a village. It would take 100 elite wizards working together to subdue it. Liu Guang arched on guard beside him, ready to teleport them away at the first sign of trouble. The Nundu, however, showed no malice. It kept a respectful distance and ceased the slow contractions of the air sacs around its neck so it wouldn't expel the venom it carried. "Human, you smell so good," a strange voice said in Lucien's head. He understood immediately. The unicorn's blessing let him hear animals speak. The Nundu's thought voice was blunt and odd. Smell good? Lucien thought of the Nundu's diet. It fed on toxins. He reached into his pocket, drew out a little bottle, one of his potions, a highly poisonous one, unscrewed the cap, and shook it under the Nundu's nose. "Do you mean this?" he asked aloud. "Yes, but there are other smells," the Nundu answered. Lucien understood then. The beast was smelling the poison on him as food. He pulled out several more vials and jars, uncapped them, and let the Nundu sniff. Those are the smells," the creature confirmed. "Human, can you give me these things to eat? I'll give you something good in return." The Nundu was remarkably straightforward. Since these were all draughts Lucien had brewed, he tossed them toward the beast one by one. The Nundu snapped them up, gulped the contents, and spat out the empty glass with a satisfied purr. Newt relaxed visibly, lowering his wand. He hadn't expected someone as young as Lucien to remain so composed in front of a Nundu, to neither panic nor show fear. Working with magical beasts required a calm mind. Animals reacted to demeanor. Lucien's quick offering of the potions also showed his knowledge of the creature's tastes and his ability to act fast. Newt guessed that Lucien had been speaking with the Nundu. Beast speech from the unicorn's blessing was invaluable here. When the last bottle was gone, the Nundu licked its lips and padded in lazy circles across the grass. It squatted, and after a moment produced a purplish-brown, barbed pellet. "Human, I've given you the good stuff. Take it quickly," it said. Lucien pinched the bridge of his nose and fought not to look. He fixed his gaze on the Nundu instead. The black vortexes in his eyes whirred. One hand went to his pocket where the small stone tablet hummed against his palm. Its smooth face had filled with a vivid image of a leopard, exactly like the Nundu, intricate lines and sigils running with a faint magical glow as the design completed. He felt a slight vibration through his magical circuit as the rubbing finished. Good, he thought. The Nundu's magical circuit recording was complete. That alone made the visit worth it. Nundus were rare and dangerous. A face-to-face recording was a treasure. The magical circuit rubbing recorded in two ways. One was to press the little stone tablet directly against the target for 5 seconds. The other was to hold the rubbing and use the Eye of Peering magic to observe the target's magical circuit until the image filled in. The latter varied with complexity. Simple beings recorded in 3 to 5 seconds. Complex ones could take minutes. For a creature as dangerous and complex as a Nundu, Lucien had chosen the safer second method rather than risk contact with its area effect venom. The Nundu's voice pushed through his concentration. "Human, don't you want it?" Lucien remained silent, keeping his eyes on the creature. "But the one next to you keeps sneaking away to take the pellets I bury. I thought you all liked them very much." Lucien almost smiled. Of course, Nundu dung was precious. Despite their poisonous diet, their excrement made an excellent raw material for powerful antidotes. Newt collecting it made sense. To the Nundu, though, that behavior looked like someone stealing its poop. Being able to hear their complaints was, Lucien thought, like opening a new door into the world. They left the Nundu's enclosure and continued the tour. Lucien marveled at the suitcase's secrets. A simple curtain could divide two utterly different environments without interference. One fold, and a tundra might lie behind it. Another, a marsh. The Scamander family had refined their world with careful, elegant magics. Newt led them past kelpies and bowtruckles, akamis and demiguises, horned serpents and more, beasts Lucien had never seen in the Forbidden Forest. His magical circuit rubbing list filled fast. Each sample was another small step along the strange road he hoped to travel toward transforming himself into magical creatures. Thunder rolled overhead. Lucien glanced up as a large golden bird streaked through the dark clouds, wings tearing the mist like a banner. "Is that a thunderbird?" he asked. Newt looked up and nodded. An injured thunderbird. Once I heal it, I'll send it back to Arizona." "And," Newt turned to Lucien, "it should be summer vacation soon. Interested in coming along?" Lucien had no objection. Read 10,000 books, travel 10,000 miles, seeing and experiencing more was an essential way to learn. He reached into his pocket for the magical circuit, rubbing to check it, and froze. The hard, cold stone was gone. Instead, something soft and warm met his fingers. He wrapped his hand around it and pulled it out. A small, furry creature with a long snout and bright, greedy eyes stared back up at him. Niffler, 133. Sniffing Gingy, a guide to raising fire dragons. Lucien was holding a small, mole-like creature. The Niffler's tiny paws were busily stuffing something into its abdominal pouch. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Ginger is still young and very curious." Newt smiled, a little embarrassed, and took the Niffler cub, named Ginger, from Lucien's hands. Gently pinching the little creature's scruff with one hand, he tickled its soft belly with the other. The Niffler couldn't stand the tickling. It squirmed and squeaked, dropping various gold and silver trinkets from its pouch. Lucien lunged and grabbed the circuit imprint stele that had slipped free. He noticed that its surface now bore a Niffler pattern, the faint trace of a magical circuit. Phew, good thing he'd seen it in time. "Ginger? That fur color is pretty rare, isn't it?" Lucien asked. Ginger kept dropping things. Nifflers normally had black fur, though grays, light blues, and other shades existed. But this little one was a pure platinum blonde, flawless, and very beautiful. Newt held Ginger in his palm, but the cub kept trying to hop down to retrieve the treasures on the floor. Lucien and Newt laughed. Newt explained, "Ginger is the offspring of an old friend of mine. The coloring is rare, which makes her easy prey for unscrupulous wizards when out in the wild, and she wasn't in the best health, so I decided to keep her close." Lucien produced a galleon and dangled it in front of Ginger. The cub's attention snapped to the coin. It reached with tiny paws to snatch it. Watching Lucien tease the Niffler with a fond smile, Newt suddenly suggested, "Lucien, would you like to try raising a Niffler?" "You mean Ginger?" Lucien asked. "Yes, if you're willing." Lucien considered. He had used the circuit imprint stele to record the magical circuits of many creatures and had accumulated a lot of samples. Having one close at hand would let him observe more closely and discover details firsthand. It seemed Newt trusted him enough to offer a Niffler on their first meeting. Raising a Niffler wasn't difficult, and he stopped teasing Ginger and handed over the galleon. The cub clutched the coin with both front paws and stuffed it into her pouch without hesitation. Nifflers were undeniably charming. "If I run into any problems looking after Ginger, I'll ask you," Lucien said. Newt smiled and handed the Niffler to him. Lucien held Ginger and, with his free hand, produced more galleons from a pocket, feeding them to the cub one by one. Ginger accepted each shiny coin and tucked it away, delightfully obedient. Lucien thought the plain galleons were too ordinary. He'd write to Aunt Penelope later and ask her to send some more ornate pieces and a few jewels. "Oh, by the way, Mr. Newt," he added, "if someone wanted to raise a dragon, what would they need to know? Any special precautions?" Newt treated the question like a curious hobby. Dragons, after all, were the most fantastical of magical creatures. They were the ones Muggles were most likely to turn into legends. Despite memory charms, a few sightings always slipped through. Newt was pleased by Lucien's interest and happily shared the basics. Wizards aren't allowed to keep dragons privately, but if you worked at a dragon sanctuary, you'd need to know a lot about them. For starters, dragon eggs are incubated by heat. When the hatchling emerges, it needs to swallow flame. Usually the parents provide it. If humans intervene, you can feed hatchlings brandy mixed with chicken's blood every half hour. It helps build immunity. And even with a newly hatched dragon, you ought to cast a fire charm on yourself. Their first breaths are hot enough to burn through everything. Lucien kept mental notes. He would be raising a dragon soon and intended to train it into a king of its kind to repay the loan for the magic weaving technique. That meant getting everything right from the start. Newt's experience was valuable. Lucien planned to ask further questions by letter, and he'd try to get Ron to introduce him to Charlie Weasley, a dragon keeper whose insight would be useful. There were other dragon sanctuaries, like the Malfoys. He might visit them too to prepare. After dragons, Lucien quizzed Newt in detail about niffler care, diet, nesting, temperament. Newt explained patiently. "Oh, and Ginger has a little hobby. She loves watching the moon, especially on a full moon." Lucien nodded. "That's perfect. I also keep mooncalves. They'll keep each other company." Watching the moon shimmer might appeal to the niffler's instincts. How curious. Lucien gave Ginger a belly scratch. Her fur was impossibly soft and warm. The two men enjoyed their visit, and the time flew. Suddenly, Newt slapped his forehead, remembered something, and began hurriedly packing his suitcase. "Oh no, I forgot to tell Tina before I left. Now when I get back, she'll be..." "Lucien, I'm off now. See you in the summer," Newt called, and in an instant, he was gone. The classroom bell rang. Lucien sat in Defense Against the Dark Arts, watching Professor Quirrell stammer through the lesson from the front. Quirrell's face was still pale, though less gaunt than before. His voice carried a little more. He wore black gloves on both hands, but the students paid more attention to his purple turban and the faint smell of garlic that clung to him. Lucien, however, noticed something else. The professor's right hand hung at his side most of the time. Quirrell almost always used his left to hold the textbook. Silently, Lucien activated his eye of peering magic. Tiny whirlpools spun in his vision as he studied the magical circuits within Quirrell. The degeneration at the ends of the circuits had stopped. Had the unicorn blood done that? Glimmer's recollection suggested Quirrell had been stained with Asterian's blood back then. Perhaps he drank it afterward. But Lucien narrowed his eyes as he saw a faint dark energy clinging to Quirrell's circuits, slowly crawling toward the heart, the half-life curse of drinking unicorn blood. His left hand's magical circuit was dim and thin, restoring severed limbs through dark arts had limits. Glimmer had burned Quirrell's left hand, but Quirrell had been cruel and kind when he'd cut off the other's arm to escape. Lucien looked at the outwardly ordinary Quirrell and recalled Dumbledore's private conversation with him after Newt had left. Dumbledore's stance hadn't changed. He believed matters were still under control and hoped the boy who lived would complete his growth and destiny. Lucien knew he couldn't easily dissuade the headmaster. The prophecy's power was undeniable. Harry would indeed be the one to face Voldemort. Still, Lucien remembered Firenze's judgment, that he could change others' fates. So how, he wondered, should he handle the threat of Lord Voldemort? Lucien sat up straight in Defense Against the Dark Arts. On the surface, he followed Professor Quirrell's lecture, but in his head, he was planning how to kill Voldemort. During Harry's second and third years, Voldemort had not truly returned. His power to stir trouble hadn't recovered, and he only caused mischief inside Hogwarts. Since the year of the Triwizard Tournament, though, Voldemort had achieved his resurrection and thrown Wizarding Britain into chaos. It had become harder to keep a quiet life at school. Lucien's priority was knowledge. He did not want his studies interrupted. In a few years, his power might be great enough to take on Voldemort's followers and then the man himself in single combat. But why wait until the enemy was whole? He didn't have time for an elegant, cinematic final duel at some glorious peak. Protecting the peace of the school and studying diligently felt like the right thing to do now. The real obstacle, he knew, was Horcruxes. A Horcrux was made when a fragment of soul was separated from the body and sealed in an object. As long as any Horcrux remained, its maker could not truly die. No matter how badly the body was damaged, part of the soul would persist and give him a chance to return. That meant beating Voldemort senseless wasn't enough unless all his Horcruxes were found and destroyed first. If Lucien's memory served, Voldemort had intended 7 Horcruxes. No, at present there should only be 6. The great snake, Nagini, had not yet been made into a Horcrux. He ought to find that snake, just to be safe. The other 6 he ran through in his head: Tom Riddle's diary, Marvolo Gaunt's ring, Ravenclaw's diadem, Hufflepuff's cup, Slytherin's locket, and he glanced at Harry sitting a few desks diagonally in front of him. The fragment Voldemort had not even known about, Harry Potter himself. If he could, Lucien planned to start collecting those Horcruxes as soon as the summer holiday. He wanted to destroy every one of those respawn points before Voldemort could be whole again. There were only a few reliable ways to destroy a Horcrux: basilisk venom, fiend fire, and the killing curse. The Gryffindor sword, having absorbed basilisk venom, would also do the job. Fiend fire or Avada Kedavra probably required a certain power and control, but basilisk venom destroyed a Horcrux at a touch. Destroying the other items would be difficult but feasible. Destroying the piece of soul inside Harry was a different problem. How do you remove it without killing him? Let him die and then resurrect him? Resurrection was messy and uncertain. Time passed. The class bell rang. Quirrell hurried out faster than usual, practically stampeding like a hungry student to the Great Hall. Later, in his office, Quirrell sank into his chair and slowly peeled off the glove on his left hand, wincing. The skin on that hand was unnaturally translucent, showing the writhing muscles and vessels beneath. The arm had been reconstructed with dark arts by Voldemort. It had been excruciating and vile, but Quirrell had endured. "It's only a temporary affliction," a voice whispered in his mind. "Once I regain a body, I will cure you with my power." Quirinus, serve me well. Find what protections guard the Philosopher's Stone. Devil's Snare, the chess, the flying keys, those are known, Quirrell thought back weakly. When we can get past that foolish great dog, we will be closer to our goal. Voldemort's whisper irritated and frightened Quirrell in equal measure. He had drunk unicorn blood. He was marked a cursed sinner and clung to life by a thread. He could not disobey. A single thought from Voldemort could snuff him out. After a moment's silence, he replied aloud, voice thin with obedience, "Yes, master." In the library, Hagrid was a rare and conspicuous sight. The half-giant moved between the stacks, peering at high shelves with ease and stooping awkwardly for the lower ones. He gently pinched a copy of From Dragon Egg to Hell between 2 fingers and smiled so happily he had to muffle it. Nearby, Madame Pince prowled with her feather duster, watching him like a hawk, as if any wrong movement would topple the building. Hagrid tucked the books under his moleskin overcoat and went to the circulation desk. "Hagrid, what are you doing in the library?" came a familiar voice. Hagrid froze and slid his books into view, glancing around nervously at Harry and his friends. "Just looking," Hagrid said. "We figured out who Nicholas Flamel is," Ron whispered triumphantly. "And we know about the Philosopher's Stone." "Shh!" Hagrid hissed, glancing from one shelf to the other. No one else seemed to have heard. Madame Pince had already settled behind the desk, and Hagrid hurriedly had the books registered. After a stern warning from the librarian, he hurried out of the library. Out in the corridor, the students whispered and guessed. "What did Hagrid hide under his coat?" someone asked. "I didn't see. Want to go take a look?" others murmured. Hagrid walked fast toward the edge of the grounds and into his hut. Inside, it was warm and dry. The dark-haired young man sitting by the fire poked the logs with a stick. "Oh, thanks, Lucien," Hagrid said as he took off his coat. "You've been a right help, watching it for me." "No trouble at all," Lucien answered, setting the books on the small round table. Hagrid's eyes lit up as he peered into the hearth. The dragon egg lay nestled in the black coals, a dull, mottled orb. I wonder when the little one'll hatch. I'm so excited, he said, rubbing his hands and staring unblinkingly at the egg. He didn't notice a tiny flicker of gold flame that danced among the orange and yellow kindling. 135. Hatching dragon eggs. 3 worried little ones. Hagrid's hut smelled of smoke and something richer, an odd metallic tang that made Lucien glance at the fire with interest. He was using a poker to stir the logs, though it was mostly for show. According to what Newt had taught him, dragon eggs needed more than ordinary heat. The mother dragon's constant warm breath and intermittent bursts of true dragon fire were essential. Dragon flames aren't just hot, they carry special magical properties that nourish an embryo's development. Ordinary hearth fires might coax an egg to crack, but the hatchling's growth would lag without the proper magic. While Hagrid was out, Lucien had asked Lu Guang to mix a trace of pure fire into the logs, an advanced flame nearly pure gold in its nature. That ensured the temperature around the egg would be high enough. He'd also had Lu Guang keep the pure fire's temperature within limits, following Newt's instructions, so they wouldn't end up with a roasted dragon. The special magical elements in dragon fire, however, were another matter. Lucien couldn't produce those himself. He certainly couldn't catch an adult dragon to help incubate the egg. A full-grown dragon would probably treat anyone who tried as a snack. Still, Lucien had a hunch that the pure fire of a Qilin might work wonders. He'd trusted his instincts before. They'd rarely steered him wrong. Here, Lucien, Hagrid said, bustling over and setting tea and snacks on the round table. Take a break. Try one of my ferret sandwiches. Lucien accepted a cup of tea, but left the infamous ferret sandwiches alone. He picked up a rock cake instead, muttered a softening charm, and bit into it. Apart from being infuriatingly dense, it was fragrant enough to distract him. Hagrid clapped his huge hands when Lucien mentioned the flames. It's brilliant, it is. Thank ye, Lucien. Ye really are a good person. Lucien went quiet. He'd come to Hagrid partly because he wanted the dragon egg. It wouldn't be a free gift, of course. He'd have to compensate Hagrid somehow. He just hadn't worked out how to bring it up yet. There was a knock at the door. Hagrid hurried to shove the egg further back into the hearth and hung a kettle above it. Lucien noticed the kettle was empty and flicked his wand. A silent aguamenti charm filled it with clear water without a drop splashing. It's Harry. Come on in, everyone, Hagrid called. Harry and his friends filed in, shaking off the chill. The place felt unseasonably warm, the fire still lit even though it was spring. Lucien nodded in greeting and returned to his tea while the trio sat down. When Hagrid offered ferret sandwiches, they declined with one nod, wisely and wordlessly. Hagrid, let's not beat around the bush, Harry said. Aside from Cerberus, what else protects the Philosopher's Stone? Hagrid's face went into an embarrassed scramble. No, I can't tell ye. You lot already know too much. He waved his hands, then backtracked. Mind, I don't rightly know all of it either. Some of the professors put things in place. Hermione leaned forward. Hagrid, what could possibly be beyond your notice here? We only want to know who else helped set the obstacles. She smiled, smoothing her tone. Besides you, who else would Dumbledore trust? Who else could he have set to help? Hagrid beamed under the compliment. Harry and Ron shot Hermione a grateful look. Lucien watched her with renewed respect. She was, even then, the brains of the trio. Ahem, well, no harm in telling ye. I lent Fluffy, and the other professors set up charms and protections, Hagrid said, sipping his tea. Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick, Professor Sprout, Professor Quirrell, Professor Snape. Oh, and of course Dumbledore himself. The three of them blinked. Professor Snape, too? Hagrid shrugged. He's a professor at Hogwarts, isn't he? Why would he want to steal the stone? That's one suspect you can cross off. As they debated, Harry suddenly noticed something unusual in the fireplace, a black mottled shape that seemed to be warming itself in the coals. He pointed. Hagrid, what's that? Hagrid's hand went to his beard, and he stiffened. This is... Ron edged forward, curious. Hermione was already tense. Hagrid, that thing could be dangerous. The fire it breathes is terrifying. She looked around at the wooden beams and furniture. You live in a wooden house. Hagrid chuckled and lifted his chin. It's all right. Lucien already helped me put up fire and water resistance charms on the place. And I've read loads of books, Hagrid continued proudly, flipping through one he'd fetched. Dragon eggs need to be kept in really hot conditions, and once they hatch, the little uns drink a bucket of brandy mixed with chicken blood every half hour. Can ye imagine? A tiny babe needs that much drink. The egg should be a Norwegian ridgeback, Hagrid went on. Lucien told me that, and I found it in a book, proved right. He hummed a pleased little tune, poking the fire. My dream's always been to raise a dragon. Before that, it was a Cerberus, and before that, an acromantula. Harry, Ron, and Hermione tried to advise Hagrid a few times, but he was vague about how he planned to handle a dragon once it hatched. Lucien, too, said little, and the trio slowly stopped prodding. After a while, they took their leave. Outside, they were heavier with worry than when they'd gone in. There were already so many threats: the stone, the mysterious figure moving around the castle, and now Hagrid might be hiding a dragon egg in a wooden hut. There were exams to think about, too. End-of-year testing was coming up, and homework was piling on. Lucien mentioned he had final exams as well, luckily with strong overlap with the Hogwarts curriculum. Early revision, he called it. Hermione was pleased by that. Harry and Ron were not. They remembered Lucien saying recently, "Some classmates have said the work's been light lately, so we're going to pick up the pace." It wasn't fair, they grumbled, and their first thought was to blame Hermione, except she'd never whisper that sort of thing privately. Neither Harry nor Ron had asked for more work. That left suspects: Malfoy, of course, and the new Slytherin girl, Daphne Greengrass. Malfoy was the obvious prime candidate, but what possible motive could he have? For the sake of peace at Hogwarts, they decided they had to find the mole. 136. Crying Hagrid. Norbert, only Lucien and Hagrid remained in the little hut. Lucien put down his empty teacup, thought for a moment, and then took the direct route. "Hagrid, I have an impertinent request. I need your help." "All right then. What is it?" Hagrid said, his back still to Lucien, as he tried to turn the dragon egg so it would lie more comfortably in the embers. Lucien faltered for a moment at Hagrid's bluntness, then went on. "If it's possible, could you let me raise this dragon egg?" Hagrid didn't answer right away. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the kettle boiling. After a few minutes, Hagrid mumbled, "Lucien, do you really need it?" "Yes." Another silence. Hagrid's deep, rough voice grew hoarse. "Then you'll take good care of it, won't you?" Before Lucien could speak, Hagrid's murmur continued, breaking up into sobs. "I know, Lucien, you're a kind person, cleverer than me. You'll look after it better. But my dream is to raise a dragon. It's so hard to get one. Finally, someone gave me an egg. He was a good person. He kept his face covered so I couldn't see him, but he bought me drink and talked with me about dragons and Cerberus. He must love magical creatures." The more Hagrid spoke, the more awed and confused Lucien became. Hagrid was crying. Why? And wasn't the egg from Quirrell? This didn't feel like an interrogation. Lucien, usually composed, wasn't sure how to console him. "You must look after it well, Lucien," Hagrid said. "I've already decided, before it even hatches, I'll call him Norbert." Harry and Hermione were right, Hagrid went on between sobs. "Dragons grow quick and are hard to hide, but you have that magical gourd-shaped container. You've got to bring Norbert to see me a lot when he's grown, yeah?" Hagrid pulled a dirty, rough handkerchief from his pocket, wiped his eyes, and blew his nose loudly. He put on thick baking gloves and, turning his head away as if he couldn't bear to look at the egg, prepared to lift it out of the hearth to hand to Lucien. Hagrid, I'm still in my first year. I'll be at Hogwarts for some years yet." "That sounds like I'm going to run off with Norbert," Hagrid said. "But you'll be able to bring him by in the daytime." Lucien stopped Hagrid's hands. "Leave the egg here. Once hatching starts, it can't be stopped halfway." Hagrid immediately withdrew his hands and awkwardly patted his messy beard. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know." "Honestly, Lucien, you know more about this. It's better that you care for Norbert." Hagrid slumped, crestfallen again. Lucien offered what comfort he could. "I learned what I know from a friend. If you want to learn, I'll tell you everything. If Norbert has children someday, or if there are other eggs in young dragons, would you help raise them too?" Hagrid asked with renewed hope. Hagrid's face lit up. "Really? Can I look after another?" Of course, if you're willing. Hagrid nodded, almost trembling. Then I'm definitely willing. My dream is to raise a dragon, if I could raise two. Watching Hagrid relax and let himself dream, Lucien breathed quietly. He needed to raise a dragon to repay the annual loan for the magic weaving technique and to accompany it for at least half a year. An extended period would give him time to find others. Norbert was a Norwegian ridgeback. Lucien would have to establish himself with that species. If he encountered more eggs or young dragons later, he could help Hagrid keep his promise. Hagrid was a good man. When he promised, he kept his promises. One morning, crack, crack, a faint fishing sound filled the wooden hut. Lucien and Hagrid, squatting beside the hearth, stared at the black egg. The firewood's orange-yellow flames had shifted to a bright, magical gold. Hagrid, used to these changes, slapped his forehead, rushed to the table, and hurriedly wrote a note, whistling to summon the owl at the window. "I have to tell Harry and the others Norbert's about to hatch," he said, and sent the letter. Then he sat back down beside Lucien, both of them nervously watching the egg. A hairline crack had appeared, but nothing more. They waited. Hagrid fidgeted. "Lucien, is this normal? It's been over an hour." "Don't worry. Dragon hatching takes time. For a Norwegian ridgeback, from the first crack to full emergence can be 4 to 8 hours. Lucien raised a hand to calm him. He'd learned much of this from Newt, and he had been observing the egg with his eye of peering magic. The young dragon's magical circuit looked healthy and vigorous. The pure fire from the divine Cheelin had done it no harm. At least Norbert wouldn't be disadvantaged at birth. Coincidentally, Ravenclaw had no classes that morning, so Lucien had stayed. Click, click, a sharper movement came from inside the shell. At the same moment, there was a knock on the door. Harry and his two friends stood there, robes and hands flecked with mud, no doubt just back from herbology. Hagrid, Lucien, and the 3 students gathered around the hearth. With a piercing scraping sound, the shell split. A small dragon pushed its way out, crawling onto the hot coals. Its jet-black scales shimmered with faint streaks of gold. Its wings were unusually broad for its size and edged with short, sharp spikes. Hagrid reached out, touched the dragon's head, and it bit his finger. Hagrid straightened, his face suddenly pale. Harry moved as if to ask if he was hurt, but Hagrid's voice trembled as he whispered, "Someone's peeking outside." 137. Charmander looking for Mother. Someone's peeking outside. At Hagrid's shout, Harry shot out of the hut, eager to chase whoever it was. He returned a little while later, dejected. "He ran off," Harry panted. "Looked like Malfoy," Ron finished uneasily. "So, is he going to tell on Hagrid?" Lucien, who'd been stirring a mixture of chicken blood and brandy, shook his head gently. Although Malfoy was one of his pupils, he hadn't suddenly become friendly with Harry. At best, he'd be a bit more reserved during lessons. Outside of that, he was the same as always. It was just children's friendships, awkwardness, rivalries. Bullying and exclusion weren't acceptable in his tiny class, but there was no need to overreact. The Gryffindor-Slytherin tension had existed for years. Only when he became a Hogwarts professor or headmaster would he have the authority to reshape school discipline. Still, Lucien couldn't help an inward sk. Malfoy had tracked Harry all the way here, persistent, if a little desperate to be friends in his own awkward way. "Hermione, what about Malfoy?" she asked, looking to Lucien with concern. Since Malfoy also studied with him, she trusted Lucien to handle it. Lucien waved the matter off as he continued to stir. "Don't worry, I'll have a word with him." He kept one eye on the task at hand, and the other on the little dragon waiting impatiently nearby. A normal Norwegian ridgeback hatchling should be totally black with no mottling, but Norbert's scales shone with streaks of gold, probably a consequence of having been incubated with little Cheelin's pure fire. The little dragon's body looked healthy and well filled out. Lucien felt a small rush of nostalgia. It was like watching another hatching after little Cheelin's. Norbert stared at him with big orange-red eyes, fear and curiosity in equal measure, and oddly, a flicker of familiar recognition. "All right, come and eat." Lucien rolled the wine barrel toward Norbert, drew his wand with his free hand, and pretended to wave it while speaking a charm. A warm, nearly pure golden flame rose from the fireplace and hung steadily before the hatchling. The concoction of chicken blood and brandy was merely supplementary. A young dragon's first true meal had to be fire. either a mundane flame, a conjured one, or best of all, a dragon parent's breath. For now, little Cheelin's pure fire would have to do. The incubation had worked, so this substitute should be fine. Norbert stretched his long snout, white nostrils twitching, and inched closer to the golden flame. Without much hesitation, he plunged forward and swallowed it. A few seconds later came a surprised little burp, accompanied by a spatter of sparks from his mouth and nostrils. Lucien let out a relieved breath. After little Cheelin had tempered the pure fire, it was safe and nourishing for a hatchling. Otherwise, Lucien would have had to feed Norbert with conjured fire, which would be less effective and put the dragon at a disadvantage. If anything, little Cheelin's gift was stronger than ordinary dragon flame. When Norbert had finished, he glanced up at the rafters as if expecting to see someone, then fixed his gaze on the wine barrel at Lucien's feet. A small, disappointed whimper escaped him, and tears gathered at the corners of his mouth. Lucien scooped a large bowl and brought it to him. The dragon buried his head and began lapping greedily. Little Cheelin, now shrunken and perched on a beam, popped his head out and gave Lucien a knowing wink. "Master, after that bite of flame, I think I've formed a special connection with him." Lucien nodded. Since the hatchling had been hatched by little Cheelin's flame and then fed that flame, some bond seemed to have been established. Whether that was just a dragon trait or something owing to little Cheelin's nature could be studied later. Norbert finished the first bowl quickly, so Lucien refilled it. The little thing seemed to drink an astonishing amount for his size, almost an entire barrel's worth if he kept it up. Seeing the dragon slurp contentedly, Hagrid's large hands rubbed together. Lucien, can I try feeding him?" Hagrid asked, eyes shining. He'd been dying to do it, but hadn't wanted to steal the moment from Lucien, the one who had incubated and cared for Norbert from the start. Lucien smiled and handed the bowl to Hagrid. Hagrid carefully held it up to Norbert, but the hatchling's attention kept flicking between the bowl and Lucien. With a sudden snap of his little wings, he leapt, glided to Lucien's feet, scrambled up into his lap, and began chirping and squeaking insistently. Harry and Hagrid thought Norbert was just being playful, but Lucien, blessed by a unicorn, heard and understood the meaning behind the sounds. "Mommy, don't you want me anymore? Mommy." Lucien's hand, extended to pick Norbert up, froze in midair. The dragon pressed his tiny horn against Lucien's palm and stretched his neck toward him. "Mommy?" Norbert repeated, wide-eyed. Lucien felt a blush creep up his neck. Most newborn animals instinctively search for their mother, and the first creature they see in the one who offers them food is often accepted as such. Perhaps because he was the first thing the hatchling had seen, and because little Cheelin's fire had been used and little Cheelin was his master, Norbert had attached himself to Lucien. Quirrell had been the one to obtain the egg somehow. Lucien didn't know if it came from a dragon mother or from illicit channels. The origin of the egg was a mystery, but that didn't help the dragon's present demand. "Ahem, I'm not your mommy," Lucien said awkwardly. Norbert's head tilted, then he peered at Lucien with puzzled eyes. "Then who is my mommy?" Lucien hesitated. He didn't know. He tried to recover. "Well, you can, call me Mom. No, call me Daddy." The hatchling didn't grasp the nuance, but was reassured he wasn't being abandoned. He wriggled and chirped. "Okay, Mommy." It's Daddy," Lucien corrected, flustered. Mommy." Lucien could only stare as Norbert settled contentedly, calling him what he had scolded into himself, and everyone else watched with a mixture of amusement and affection. The room of requirement had emptied. Everyone else had left, but Lucien had kept Malfoy behind. He closed the door and looked at him. "Why did you run this morning?" Malfoy stammered. "Well, Potter chased me, so I ran." Lucien shook his head a little. He couldn't make sense of the pair chasing and running from each other. Then he surprised Malfoy with an offer. "Come with me to the dragon farm tonight. I remember you like these creatures." Malfoy's eyes lit up. Lucien, remembering his interest, was flattering, and the straightforward invitation made him fumble for words. "I won't tell anyone. I understand." "Malfoy doesn't betray his friends," Lucien said, tidying up scattered papers and musing inwardly that was only true if his friends were strong enough to protect him. Malfoy cleared his throat. "Do I have to pay?" Lucien looked up. "What?" Malfoy hurried on when Lucien gave him a puzzled look. Oh, my family's dragon farm lets visitors take photos with the dragons for a fee. Lucien blinked. You can take photos with a dragon? That sounded suicidal. Dragons were XXXX class dangerous creatures. Only very skilled wizards should get close to them. Still, if Malfoy's family really did run a dragon farm, a visit over summer break might be interesting. It could even serve as a bit of reconnaissance for Norbert, useful if he ever had to deal with Norwegian ridgebacks himself. Draco, he asked, these dragons are real, not some glamored illusion? Malfoy patted his chest in a show of confidence. We're honest in business. If we say it's a dragon, it's a dragon. People flock to see them. Lucien stared. Wizards did have an adventurous, sometimes reckless streak. There haven't been any accidents, he pressed. Dragons are dangerous. Malfoy shrugged, oddly casual. Oh yes, 2 or 3 accidents every month. And we've introduced supplementary insurance and aftercare. Everyone's satisfied. Lucien suppressed a smile at the cheery practicality. It was a one-stop service for dragon-related injury. So if I came, how many galleons would it be? No, no, no. Malfoy waved his hands. No charge. Just tell me ahead of time and I'll bring you. Malfoy's father had taught him that mutual favors deepened friendships. That was why he'd offered. Lucien let the plan stand. A summer visit to a dragon farm would be useful and intriguing. After dinner, they found themselves at Hagrid's hut. On the table sat a small dragon, absorbed in a brandy-soaked chicken rib. Malfoy's eyes shone as he watched. That's a Norwegian ridgeback, he breathed. It's like a Hungarian horntail, but without the tail spikes. There's an extra row of ridges along the back, hence the name. They like aquatic animals. There was once one that carried off a whale calf. They're fierce, especially to their own kind, which is why they're getting rare. He rattled off facts as if they were family heirlooms. Though his family ran a dragon farm, Malfoy had rarely been allowed close to the animals. His father always claimed safety concerns. Still, he'd been promised he could visit this summer, which was why he'd guaranteed the outing to Lucien. Seeing the little dragon drinking, Malfoy couldn't help himself and reached out. Ah! A sharp cry. Everyone covered their ears. Malfoy snatched his hand back. A row of bloody puncture wounds marred the side of his palm. The dragon, Norbert, bared tiny teeth and glowered as if affronted at being touched. Malfoy went pale and clutched his hand. All right, it's okay. He wasn't trying to steal your food, Lucien murmured as he reached to stroke Norbert, who immediately relaxed and purred. Dragon hide, Lucien thought, felt like nothing else. What Diagon Alley sold as dragon hide gloves was often from terrestrial species, mixed and diluted. True dragon materials were rare. He extended a hand and pulled a crystal vial from his robes. Hold out your hand. Thinking Lucien was about to help dress the wound, Malfoy obeyed. A single drop of clear liquid hit the bite, and the bleeding slowed, and the wound began to knit visibly. Malfoy's eyes widened. He recalled that Norwegian ridgeback teeth carried a venom that, while usually non-fatal, would swell and ache for days. But that single drop, combined with Lucien's pronounced skill in potions, did the trick. Seeing Malfoy punished by a magical creature and patched up by Lucien, Harry couldn't help but clench his fist in sympathy. He'd been badly bitten by a Cerberus before, and he felt a small kinship with anyone who'd suffered a magical bite. Norbert finished the bone, leapt gracefully into Lucien's lap, curled up and yawned. Lucien hummed softly and patted the dragon's back, coaxing it toward sleep. Everyone watching felt a twinge of envy. Who could be so at ease with a dragon? Lucien stepped into the gourd space. Norbert, who had been tailing Glimmer, immediately ran to him, spread his wings, flapped a few times, and then launched into the air. "Mommy," the little dragon cried, flying straight into Lucien's arms. "It's better to call me Daddy," Lucien said, half amused, half helpless. He hugged Norbert like a large, lively puppy. The change in the dragon was striking. Its growth had been unbelievably fast. In just a few days, Norbert had nearly doubled in size. "Okay, Mommy," Norbert babbled reflexively, unable to break the habit. Lucien sighed inwardly. The dragon was still young. Instinct and habit held more sway than titles. Let it be for now. No one else would understand anyway. He examined Norbert closely. Development was normal. The wings no longer had all the creases of newborn skin. They were broader and stronger. The scales gleamed, full and intact, the golden veins running through them more distinct than at birth. Lucien murmured to Glimmer, and a fist-sized ball of pure fire floated in front of Norbert, who swallowed it in a few eager gulps. Solid food after the main course. Lucien had mixed brandy with chicken blood and watched smiling as Glimmer played with Norbert. A recent check had shown Norbert to be a female Norwegian Ridgeback. Female dragons of that breed tended to be larger and more aggressive than males, traits that could be turned to advantage. If he raised Norbert well, she could become a leader among Norwegian Ridgebacks. The breed was relatively scarce, so establishing dominance wouldn't be an interminable struggle. Malfoy had explained how combative those Ridgebacks were, much like how horned serpents fought during mating. Survival by strength. After Lucien finished preparing the chicken blood brandy, Norbert devoured it and, satisfied, let out a small burp accompanied by a tiny puff of dragon flame. Ridgebacks develop fire breathing early, and even at this age, Norbert's budding breath was noticeable. The gourd space was roomy and, aside from Norbert, empty. That was deliberate. Dragons had fierce territorial instincts. Keeping Norbert with other, gentler creatures would be asking for trouble. Even a newborn's robust body and developing breath could threaten more delicate animals. Following Newt's guidance, Lucien walked the perimeter with his wand, expanding the enclosure bit by bit to make Norbert's home more comfortable. Before he left, he conjured a few new toys, since the previous ones had long since been played to pieces. Leaving the dragon's gourd, Lucien entered another. This one housed a variety of harmless, friendly creatures, puffskeins, diricals, and the like. He approached a large, unremarkable tree and paused at a hollow set about chest high. The tree's bark looked plain from the outside, but the hollow glittered with coins, galleons, sickles, and nuts, galleons being the most numerous. A small, platinum-colored niffler lay on its back in a corner, clutching a galleon in each tiny paw, belly rising and falling in a deep sleep. The sight of the niffler, Gingy, made Lucien chuckle. He produced a few more coins from his pocket and slipped them into the hollow. When he scratched Gingy's belly, the niffler tightened its grip on the coins without waking. "In a few days, I'll get you other kinds of treasure," he murmured. He'd already written to Aunt Penelope, asking her to send some jewelry and trinkets to the school. By his calculation, they should arrive soon. Nifflers preferred variety as much as they preferred shininess, and Newt had warned him that their mental well-being depended on a display of assorted treasures. Raising a niffler was an expensive hobby. Fortunately, Lucien could afford it. A soft whinny sounded, and something nudged his pant leg. He looked down to see Aurora, the golden little unicorn. He stroked her forehead and led her to a sunny patch of ground. He produced lake-washed berries and moon-petal leaves to feed her, then prepared to use his eye of peering magic to inspect her magical circuit. That's when he noticed it, a wing-shaped, cloud-like pattern on the golden fur of Aurora's shoulder blade. There was one on the other side as well. It hadn't been there yesterday. Asterion and Selenea didn't have anything similar. Lucien frowned and focused the eye of peering magic. Tiny whirlpool-like eddies seemed to appear in his vision. The enhancement revealed changes in Aurora's circuit. A normal unicorn's magical circuit is almost a closed loop, and Aurora's, after her earlier repair, had followed that pattern. Now small undulations rippled through the loop, no dramatic breaks, just subtle ripples, like a calm lake with a few tiny waves. Consulting the magic weaving technique in his mind, Lucien judged the change a benign circuit mutation. When a magical creature's circuit is truly modified, variations, both beneficial and harmful, can appear. Aurora had only been repaired rather than altered, so the change was slight. Still, a benign mutation was relieving. The circuit should stabilize by summer vacation, and then they could see what advantages, if any, the mutation conferred. The magic weaving technique worked best during a creature's growth period, when the body was stronger and the circuit more plastic. Although infancy offered the greatest plasticity, it was also the most fragile time, so risks were higher. Following the technique's spells, Lucien cast a dozen different weave spells on Aurora's internal circuit, each with a different effect. When he was done, he took out 2 small bottles of potion, one to apply to Aurora's back and waist, and one to give her orally. "Good girl, this will help you heal faster," he soothed. "But it's really bitter," Aurora neighed softly, clearly protesting. "How about a lemon snowdrop after you finish?" Lucien said, producing a yellow hard candy wrapped in clear paper. White sugar clung to its surface. Aurora looked at it longingly, then made a few timid, eager sounds. Another one. Another one. That brown frog, she asked in her own way. Lucien grinned. She meant chocolate frogs. He took out a box, but kept the lid closed so the frogs couldn't spring free of their packaging. Aurora's eyes brightened, and she obediently drank the potion from the bottle. When she was finished, Lucien fed her the lemon snowdrop and then the chocolate frog. He hadn't expected unicorns to enjoy sweets so much. Perhaps she had something in common with old Dumbledore after all. The Great Hall. Though it was almost dinner time, the hall was sparsely filled. The term was ending, and everyone was deep in study. The big year-end exam loomed. 5th and 6th years were already grinding for owls and newts. Some older students, it was said, had come down with such anxiety they'd been sent to Madame Pomfrey for calming draughts. "Don't worry, you've all worked hard. You'll do fine," Lucien told the students he was tutoring, trying to soothe them. This was their first formal major exam at Hogwarts, and Harry and his two friends, as well as Malfoy and Daphne, all showed varying degrees of nerves. Coo, an owl swooped down the hall and dropped a medium-sized parcel right in front of Lucien. With a flick of his wand, the wrapping loosened itself. Lucien guessed at once it was from his aunt Penelope. He opened it to find an elegant black box packed with jewelry, necklaces, rings, brooches, delicate, mostly feminine pieces. He unfolded the accompanying letter. "Dear Lucien, these are the jewels you need. I specifically chose some styles that young girls like. Time was tight, so I didn't have a chance to have anything made. Tell me in your next letter what your friend prefers, and I'll—" Lucien's eyebrows lifted as he read the first sentence. Had Aunt Penelope misunderstood? He wasn't planning to give these to anyone human. These were for a niffler named Gingy. The pieces were light, tasteful, and designed for young girls, with gold, silver, diamonds, jade, and emeralds interspersed, just the sort of trinkets Gingy would covet. He closed the box and slipped it into his pocket. Harry, Ron, and Malfoy glanced at the parcel and quickly looked away. None of them were interested. Ron paused only long enough to wonder how much such things might be worth in Muggle terms, then went back to gnawing on his braised chicken wing. Hermione and Daphne, however, watched more closely. Both stole discreet looks at Lucien and at the jewelry. The pieces were clearly for a girl, and both of them grew curious. Who was Lucien planning to give them to? They began to think of ways to ask him. A flash of crimson flame erupted near the head table. Fawkes streamed out of it with a clear, ringing cry. Lucien understood immediately and nodded. "I have time now," he said. Fawkes hovered above Lucien, flames licking, then in a blink the two of them vanished. In less than a breath, Lucien reappeared in the familiar calm of the headmaster's office. "Good afternoon, headmaster." "Good afternoon, Lucien." Lucien sat, and Dumbledore spoke slowly. "Lucien, with exams coming up, your studies must be taking up much of your time. There have been things at the Ministry as well. Fudge has been seeking my help lately." As Dumbledore chatted, Lucien's mind tightened with the sense that the year's great drama was closing in. After the exams, Dumbledore would be away from Hogwarts for a time, and then Quirrell and Tom would be free to act. Their goal, the thing they had pursued all year, was the Philosopher's Stone. Dumbledore sighed and touched his beard. A translucent ruby sat on the table between them. "Although it no longer grants true immortality, there are always those who will try," he said, "so I can only keep it in the safest place available, Hogwarts. Of course, I've asked the professors to put many obstacles in place to safeguard the stone," he added. Lucien fought a smile. "Set up the obstacles first and only place the prize at the last minute. Practical enough. Too bad the prize was past its prime," he thought. And Hogwarts' greatest safeguard, really, was Dumbledore himself. Without him, the school's defenses would be less reassuring. Dumbledore produced a long crimson feather tipped with gold and handed it to Lucien. "This is a tail feather of Fawkes," he explained. "If you kindle it, Fawkes can bring me back at once." Lucien took the feather from the phoenix's outstretched beak and examined it. He understood immediately, a direct line to summon help in an emergency. Dumbledore was unlikely to place magical surveillance that might alarm Quirrell and his allies. Instead, he relied on more discreet measures, and Lucien thought, on the knowledge that Harry was protected by something no ordinary magic could touch: love. There was also the practical reality. The stone no longer contained enough power to restore Voldemort fully. In the end, that would limit what Tom Riddle could hope to achieve. "By the way, Lucien," Dumbledore said, with a curious gleam, "would you like to see the obstacles?" "They're the professor's work," Lucien replied. "I think I'll find the process of solving them amusing."